It's about time when reckless MMA fighters went overboard with their skills, almost killing their opponents. Some of the clips in the video are so unreal that it might have sounded absolutely made up if it wasn't recorded. So without any further ado, let's hop onto this ride and see 10 of the most vicious knockouts in the history of MMA. Before the video starts, make sure you are subscribed to our channel and hit the bell icon to never miss a single update from us. Let's begin, shall we? Number 10. Hussein Maki. This one is probably one of the most popular and well-known matches of MMA. It was between Hussein Maki and Mattis. Both of them were known to be the greatest in their own format. Although leg kicks and other leg movements are quite limited in this format of the game, these players were constantly using this move to defend themselves in spite of the referee's several warnings. During this moment, Mattis, in his own self-defense, kicked the calf region of Hussein Maki's right leg really hard and went about celebrating his win without even looking at his opponent, who was fallen senseless on the ground. The judges were infuriated and immediately ordered to stop the match at that exact moment. On further investigation, it was known that Hussein Maki had permanently lost one of his legs owing to breakage of bones due to the hard kick by his opponent. He was immediately admitted into the hospital and was luckily saved. Unfortunately, his right leg had to be amputated. Number 9. Leslie Smiths. Well, if you're easily grossed out by seeing blood, then this might be a very terrible one for you. It was the M&A match between Leslie Smith and Jessica Eye. In the heat of the moment, Jessica had accidentally punched Leslie's left ear, due to which the vein inside of her ear burst to cover her entire face in blood. The ear was half torn apart and was about to fall off her face. According to doctors, it is one of those rare cases when the inner vein of the ear bursts and blood comes out of the outer skin, but the ear remains attached a bit to the face. We don't know what Leslie Smith must have gone through because the footage itself is really disturbing to see. The blood kept oozing out of her ear endlessly and in a huge amount until she was rushed into the hospital and the ear was surgically stitched back into her face. If the crew members hadn't immediately rushed her into the hospital, then Leslie would have permanently lost her left ear for sure. Number 8. Joanna Jędrzejczyk. The more we get into the list, it becomes more clear that women's MMA fights are lethal. Something similar was the match between Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Jean. It was during the UFC matches of one 150-pound category. The match was lethal, and by the end of it, both Joanna and Jean had been terribly injured. But that's not even the worst part of the entire match's scenario. It was the head of Joanna Jędrzejczyk which had turned blue and was blown, looking like an alien. After a few days of losing against John Willie, Joanna released an interview in which her entire face was of gray color and her head had swelled up like a literal alien. While looking at her video, you might think that she actually forgot to take off her makeup, but as it turns out, it was all the wounds from the previous match that were still recovering. She said in that interview that she wants to take a few days off any MMA fight to completely recover. Otherwise, doctors had given a statement that her head actually might burst out. Number 7. Mike Perry. This is once again not for those who hate seeing blood all around. Man, the amount of blood in this one is really scary. It was a fight between Mike Perry and Luke when things got a little out of the hands of both of the MMA fighters. At one point, Luke held the face of Mike Perry and blew his face with the help of his fists nearly 20 times. This resulted in the breaking of Mike Perry's nose completely, and gushes of blood started to fall out of his face. Not just that, even after almost entirely breaking his nose, Luke didn't stop there. Instead, he smashed his head off Mike between his two arms and pinned him down to the ground until the referees forced him to stop the match. Luke's half body was covered with Mike's blood, and Mike wasn't even in a condition worth watching. In an interview, Mike revealed that he was waiting for the match to end as soon as possible so that he could get his rhinoplasty surgery done. After getting the surgery and fixing his nose, no one was even able to recognize that once his nose was broken to such an extent. Number 6. Donald Cerrone. When it comes to fighting, Donald Cerrone is a legend in himself. His old-school style and strong body never let him lose even a single match that he had played. He is so strong that fighting with him almost feels like punching sharp nails. But during a fight with Tony Ferguson, Donald Cerrone made a very rookie mistake. When Tony hit Donald on his face, his nose started bleeding. This is a very common sight when considering MMA fights. But the mistake that Donald committed was that he blew his nose on the stage itself, which caused a blood rush into his right eye. This prevented him from seeing anything, and he turned half blind on the stage. Referees immediately stopped the match and declared Tony Ferguson as the winner. During the post-match ceremony, Donald Cerrone confessed that if he hadn't blown his nose on the stage right away, then he wouldn't have lost such an important tournament. He even apologized to Tony and his fans for not being able to complete the match. Number 5. Alistair Overeem. This is probably one of the deadliest matches in the history of MMA. It was during a fight between Alistair Overeem and Rozenstruik when, as usual, the fight got a little out of hand and Alistair almost got saved from the verge of dying. It took place when Rozenstruik blew Alistair with a very clean punch on his face, which resulted in Alistair falling onto the ground right away. When investigated, it was found out that it was just another case of perforated skin, except this time it was Alistair's lips. The corner of his lips was torn apart, ending up in his nostrils. His lip was literally falling out of his face, and thank God that it did not reach his nose, otherwise his entire face would have been torn apart. When referees noticed him falling onto the ground, they immediately suspended the match. Thanks to the wonders of plastic surgery, that Alistair got his lips fixed immediately and is now left with a minor scratch only. Number 4. Sage Northcutt. This fight between Sage Northcutt and Cosmo Alexander is extremely popular, and almost everybody knows who the winner was. This fight is really popular because Cosmo Alexander knocked down Sage Northcutt with a single punch to his face. At first, there were minor injuries on Sage's face, but after being admitted to the hospital, it was found out that Sage Northcutt's entire left cheekbone had been fractured. He immediately went under surgery, and he constantly showed glimpses of his recovery to his fans. His face was scary to look at, with one eye completely red with the flow of excess blood into it. Although he has not completely recovered from his injury now, sources claim that he is much better. It is very devastating to know how a single injury can lead to causing so much damage. Number 3. The worst leg break. Now, if you were shocked by any single of the matches on the list above, then this particular one will give you nightmares. It was during a match between Chris Williams and Jonathan King that the impossible took place. Chris landed a kick on Jonathan, which infuriated him. As a way of returning his favor to Chris, Jonathan tried to lend another kick to his opponent. But things went wrong when this kick turned out deadly for Jonathan himself. He fell straight into the ground immediately and his leg broke in half. After seeing the horrific sight of Jonathan's foot sticking out of his leg at an angle of 90 degrees, Chris immediately ran off the ring, and so did the referee. He was immediately rushed into the hospital and couldn't walk for days. His fracture hasn't completely recovered yet. Number 2. Shinya Aoki's middle finger. In the MMA world, the commentators often say that there are people, there are aliens, and then there is Shinya Aoki. During a match with Mizuto Hirota, he got on top of Shinya and wouldn't let go and wasn't ready to quit at all. This infuriated Shinya, and what he did was quite horrific. He took matters into his own hands and twisted the arm of Mizuto Hirota at a right angle, which resulted in the permanent bending of his arm, which has not recovered until now. But did Shinya feel sorry about this? Not at all. Rather, he went above his defeated opponent, laying on the ground, and showed him his middle finger. This has been one of the greatest moments of disgrace in MMA match history. Number 1. Cyborg Santos. If it wasn't for the paramedical department, Cyborg Santos would have been a dead man now. It was during a match between Cyborg Santos and Michael Venom Page when Michael landed a huge blow on Cyborg's skull. Nobody realized what Michael had done until when it turned out that the Cyborg's skull had been crushed into tiny hundreds of pieces. For the first 2 to 3 days, doctors weren't even sure if he's gonna make it alive or not. It is still one of the deadliest and ugliest moments in the history of MMA. Michael Venom Page often expresses his condolences and feels sorry for what he did to Cyborg.